The death of Nolan Wells has been provided to the Wells family, prosecutors, and law enforcement. According to TMZ, the report includes a photo showing 3 boats anchored off Horn Island on the 4th of July. That includes the Triton, which investigators say left the island at 4:31 that afternoon without Wells. The report also says the last independently corroborated sighting of Wells was between 3:23 and 4:27 p.m., leaving what the United Cajun Navy calls several unanswered questions about his whereabouts. The Mississippi Board of Nursing closed its investigation into an anonymous complaint against Wells' mother, Christine Wansley. Wansley announced the decision in a social media post saying the professional misconduct case has been closed. She said the complaint added more hurt to an already devastating time as her family continues to grieve. The investigation stemmed from an anonymous complaint filed while the family was seeking answers in Nolan's death. Wansley recently spoke about the harassment her family has faced since calling for justice.
There's been questions about our parenting, our GoFundMe, this, that, and other. I've been called a racist. I am a healthcare provider, and I take my job very seriously.
Wansley said that while the board's case is now closed, her son's death remains and an investigation remains active. She writes, the question is,
there is a 64-minute hole in the last day Nolan Wells was alive. No photograph, no video, no GPS coordinate, no corroborated witness account. Just a stretch of time on a remote Mississippi barrier island where an 18-year-old college football player vanished from the record, and where the boat carrying his friends later pulled away without him. That gap is not speculation. It is now documented, named, and labeled material by the same volunteer search organization that found his body. And it sits at the exact center of everything we still do not know. If this is your first time here, welcome to Reopened Crime Scenes. Hit like and subscribe now, because what happened to Nolan Wells is still unfolding, and this case is far from closed. The United Cajun Navy did not release a theory. They released a 22-page analytical document built from photos taken on July 4th, social media videos, GPS data from the boats on Horn Island, and witness accounts from the roughly 60 people present that day. This is not commentary. This is not a screenshot passed around without context. It is a structured, methodical report from an organization with a documented, verifiable history in this specific case. They were there when Nolan was found. They offered cadaver dogs with real prior case history. They have moved from hands-on search assistance to forensic offers to a full written analysis. That progression matters because it reflects sustained, genuine engagement with a case that has otherwise been flooded with noise. This is what the report actually states, without inflation or drama. It identifies a material gap in the timeline between Nolan's last independently verified sighting and the reported departure of the boat carrying his friends away from the island. That is the entire headline, not a conclusion about what happened, not an accusation, just a documented, specific absence where the evidence currently stops. Material is not a casual word here. In investigative contexts, it means significant enough to matter. This is not a minor missing detail. It is a consequential absence, sitting at the exact point in the timeline where the central question of this case must be resolved. Did Nolan Wells choose to stay behind on that island, as his friends have said, or did something else happen in that window that no one has yet been able to verify? The report does not answer that. It simply documents that the gap exists, that it has not been filled, and that until it is, no narrative claiming certainty about Nolan's movements during that period can be supported by the evidence we actually have. Closing that gap would require 3 specific things. Authenticated metadata from original, unedited photo and video files confirming exactly when and where they were created, not just when they were posted online. Additional GPS records from the boats and devices whose location histories have not yet been fully examined, and more witness statements from anyone who was present during that exact window and has not yet come forward. Each of those is a distinct, actionable path forward. and each underscores how much evidence may still be scattered across personal devices and social media accounts, invisible to investigators without the community reach to gather it. We have seen before why authenticated metadata matters in this case. The pool party photo, which many believed showed Nolan alive after his disappearance, was only conclusively debunked once its actual creation data was examined. It had been taken more than a week earlier. One viral claim, resolved not by argument but by a technical check of the file itself. That is the model this report proposes, applied across every piece of visual evidence from July 4th. The gap will not close on speculation. It will only close on verification. But while investigators work to fill that void, misinformation is rushing in to fill it for them. Mississippi Department of Public Safety Commissioner Sean Tyndall issued a direct public warning about a toxicology report circulating online that claims to belong to Nolan Wells. The report is fraudulent. Tyndall did not issue a press release and move on. He wrote publicly that Nolan's family, friends, and most importantly, Nolan himself deserve better. He named the force behind it: fraudsters, artificial intelligence, and social media. All they want you to do is click and share. Don't. That is an unusually personal framing for a state official. He treats this not as procedural misinformation, but as a violation of a young man who can no longer speak for himself, whose actual medical findings are being fabricated and circulated for attention, while the real state autopsy remains complete but sealed, even from his own family. Russ Latino, the attorney representing Nolan's friend Bart Edmiston Jr., issued a separate warning confirming the same problem. "Someone's death should not be your entertainment," he wrote. "Touch grass today." Latino represents someone who has already faced documented harassment and threats connected to this case. His frustration is not abstract. It is the product of watching unverified, sensationalized content reshape real people's safety. And that danger has now reached the federal level. A third person, Edward James Porter of Illinois, now faces federal charges for transmitting threatening communications across state lines. He allegedly told a witness he would come kill them and their family, then sent the witness's own home address to prove he knew where they lived. This arrest has nothing to do with how Nolan died. It has everything to do with how a case consumed by social media has begun consuming the people inside it. Two others have already been charged. Joseph Alfredo Vasquez Dumas allegedly threatened a judge with a bomb package. Michelle Francine Edwards allegedly called Clark offices with bomb threats, telling them the clock is ticking. These are not online arguments. These are federal crimes committed by people who have convinced themselves they know the truth without ever seeing the evidence. Through all of this, Nolan's mother, Christine Wansley, has refused to let her son's story be rewritten. She has pushed back publicly on claims about his drinking that day, challenging the narrative that has circulated in some corners of the internet. She has spoken about the son who cooked dinner for his parents the night before he left, who told them he loved them, who was raised to stay with his group. And she has waited, along with everyone else, for the sealed state autopsy to reveal what the independent autopsy could not determine. The independent examination found red discoloration in the soft tissue at the back of Nolan's head, but no fractures, no deep tissue injuries, and a body too decomposed to rule out bruising. The cause and manner of death remain undetermined pending investigation, so we are left with a documented gap, a sealed autopsy, a fraudulent document circulating as fact, 3 federal arrests for threats, and a family still asking the same question they asked on the night of July 4th. Where was Nolan in those 64 minutes? And why does the evidence, so far, have nothing to say? This is part 1. In part 2, we break down the 5 critical questions the United Cajun Navy report says must be answered before that gap can close, including the unidentified Boat X that left Horn Island that afternoon, and the phone records that have not yet been examined. If you want to see where this goes, like this video, and subscribe to Reopened Crime Scenes. We follow the evidence. And the evidence, right now, is pointing straight into a hole that somebody needs to fill. The state of Mississippi knows how Nolan Wells died. His mother does not. The official autopsy is complete. Every incision has been made. Every sample analyzed. Every finding compiled into a report that now sits behind a seal. It will go before a Jackson County grand jury, before Nolan's own family is allowed to read a single page of it. And while that silence holds, a fabricated toxicology report bearing his name is spreading across social media, confirmed fraudulent by Mississippi Department of Public Safety Commissioner Sean Tindell. That is not coincidence. That is what happens when a case creates a vacuum, when evidence is withheld so long that the empty space starts to fill with whatever horror people can manufacture, share, and believe. If you have been following this case with us on Reopened Crime Scenes, you know we do not traffic in speculation. We follow the evidence. Hit like and subscribe now, because the evidence is telling us that the danger around this case is no longer theoretical. It is in someone's inbox. It is on someone's phone, and it is getting worse. This fake toxicology report is not the first lie to infect this case. It is the fourth. Before it, there was the disputed enhanced audio, the pool party photo that was only debunked once its metadata proved it was taken more than a week earlier, and the mischaracterization that Nolan was found fully clothed when he was not. Each one spread for the same underlying reason. When real answers are withheld, fabricated ones rush in to take their place. Commissioner Tindell did not issue a routine press release. He wrote directly to the public that Nolan's family, friends, and most importantly, Nolan himself deserve better. He named the engine behind this specific fraud. Fraudsters, artificial intelligence, and social media. All they want you to do is click and share. Don't. Modern tools can generate documents that look convincingly official, complete with realistic formatting, terminology, and letterhead, without requiring any access to actual confidential medical findings. And in a case where the real toxicology results have never been released, where the body spent time in warm coastal water, complicating any eventual toxicology readings, that forged document found exactly the fertile ground it needed. But the misinformation is no longer the most dangerous thing circulating around this case. That distinction now belongs to the threats. Edward James Porter is 40 years old. He lives in Berwyn, Illinois, more than 500 miles from the Mississippi coast. He has no confirmed connection to Nolan Wells, no confirmed connection to Nolan's friends, and no confirmed connection to anything that happened on Horn Island on July 4th. Yet according to a federal criminal complaint filed by Homeland Security Investigations Special Agent Christopher Clark, Porter threatened to kill 2 separate witnesses connected to this case. He told one witness he had their home address and was going to come kill them and their family. Then he texted that witness their own address directly. He called a second witness and threatened to kill them, cut up their body, and stuff them into a suitcase. These are not vague online comments. These are specific, graphic, intimate acts of terror, calculated to maximize fear by proving the sender knows exactly where you live. That is not anger. That is surgical intimidation, and it is part of a pattern that now spans 3 states. Porter's arrest follows Joseph Alfredo Vasquez Dumas, arrested for threatening Chancery Judge Ashley Cole, and Michelle Francine Edwards, arrested for bomb threats directed at Clark offices with the message that the clock is ticking. 3 people, 3 states, 3 federal cases. None of them had any direct connection to the actual events of July 4th. All of them were following this case from a distance and translated whatever anger or conviction they felt into real prosecutable federal crimes. This is not an isolated incident. This is a sustained wave, and it has triggered a coordinated multi-agency federal response, with Homeland Security investigations working alongside the FBI to identify and prosecute these threats, regardless of where in the country they originate. It is critical to understand what these arrests are not. No one has been charged in connection with Nolan Wells' disappearance or death. Not one of these three arrests brings us closer to knowing what happened in that 64-minute gap. Headlines reading, "Arrest made in Nolan Wells' case," are technically accurate but catastrophically misleading if read quickly. They refer to the threat investigation, a genuinely serious but entirely separate federal matter running parallel to the death investigation itself. Every one of these arrests represents real accountability for witness intimidation. None of them represents a resolution to how Nolan died. The confusion is understandable but dangerous, because it creates the false impression that the case is closing, when in truth, it remains wide open. While strangers 500 miles away terrorize the people connected to this case, Nolan's mother, Christine Wansley, has stepped into the public conversation to defend her son against a different kind of attack. Claims have circulated that Nolan was heavily intoxicated before he disappeared, an implication that his own choices somehow explain or excuse what happened to him afterward. Christine has pushed back directly. She heard he was, in her words, perfectly fine. She is not disputing that drinking happened broadly across the group on the island that day. Multiple friends have already confirmed that context. What she is disputing is the more targeted, more inflammatory framing of Nolan himself being singled out as heavily intoxicated in a way that goes beyond what has been described about the broader group. That distinction matters because it sits at the center of a pattern that shows up repeatedly in cases involving young black men. Frame the victim's own behavior as contributing to his death, and you diminish the demand for a real answer. You shift the burden from the investigation to the deceased. Christine has refused to let that happen. Whatever her son's choices were on July 4th, they do not negate the seriousness of the investigation his family deserves. And they do not give anyone permission to stop asking what really happened during the hour when no one can account for him. So this is where we stand. A credible independent organization has documented a material gap in the timeline without claiming to know what filled it. State officials have confirmed that any toxicology report circulating online is fraudulent, while the real report remains sealed along with the completed state autopsy, unavailable even to Nolan's own grieving family. A third person now faces federal charges for threatening witnesses, part of a multi-state campaign of intimidation with no connection to the actual death investigation. And Nolan's mother continues to fight for her son's name against a narrative that would blame him for his own death. The gap remains. The autopsy is sealed. The threats continue. And a family that has fought this hard for this long is still waiting for the truth they were promised. We will stay on this story as the United Cajun Navy's identified timeline gap gets further investigated, as the sealed autopsy moves through the grand jury process, and as real verified findings are finally confirmed. We will bring you the facts as we get them verified, and not a moment before. If you want to see what happens when that grand jury finally receives those sealed findings, subscribe to Reopened Crime Scenes and turn on notifications. This case is not closed. It is only getting started.